I'm a simple man. I like movies and I like Dragon Ball. Sometimes they mix well together and sometimes not so much. For years in the fandom, there's always been talk about live-action Dragon Ball content. From the various fan-made projects to the constant bashing of Dragon Ball Evolution. I'm so glad we're past that era. I often hear people say that Dragon Ball can't work in live action and that it wouldn't translate over well. But why wouldn't it? Akira Toriyama has always drawn heavy influence from major blockbusters for his work, everything from Jackie Chan movies to Terminator and Aliens, so the blueprints are there. Dragon Ball isn't in a content drought anymore. Superheroes show me that the franchise has room to attempt new things, and I welcome that. If we constantly got the same kind of Dragon Ball content over and over again, it would just become stale. I'm a firm believer that if you get a solid script that not only embraces but respects the source material and has a proper understanding of what makes Dragon Ball so beloved, then you can churn out a damn good product. So that's why I want to talk about how Dragon Ball could potentially work in live action, and how I would personally go about it. Now, I'm not a professional writer, nor do I have any experience on any major productions, but I figured this might be a fun exercise that could lead to some discussion. The first thing we need to answer is what makes Dragon Ball work? Now, this is a question that you will find many different answers for, mainly because Dragon Ball means a lot of different things to many people. Dragon Ball throughout its almost 40-year lifespan has been many things. It's been a gag manga, a martial arts battle manga, a space opera, and sometimes all of the above at once. To me, Dragon Ball is a martial arts story that's driven by the characters. Saying that Dragon Ball is just cool fights is a bit disingenuous in my opinion. The spectacle and intensity of the battles are cool, but have never been the main draw for me personally. The fights are at their best when used to push characters forward in their development. For example, look at Goku vs Vegeta in the Saiyan arc. Not only is the choreography fire, but it works as a clashing of two ideologies. An underdog rising to the challenge of a superior fighter, a low-class warrior raised on Earth who had to work for everything versus the pampered prince with the superiority complex, who then proceeds to get humbled. The first punch Goku lands on Vegeta during the Kaioken x3 is so cathartic for that reason. When fights just exist for the sake of it, then it will just eventually get monotonous. Like Gotenks vs Super Buu. I'd probably never sit through that fight ever again. So with that understood, how can we translate that into a live action? Well, let me ask you this. Think of your favorite TV show or movie. What elements do they have in common? I'd say three main factors are a compelling premise, attractive characters, and memorable set pieces. The best films and shows check off that criteria. To create something that captivates an audience, you need a story that entices them, characters they can get behind, and scenes that stick with them even after they finished watching it. A name I see brought up pretty often around a live-action Dragon Ball movie is Zack Snyder. It's mainly due to his work on Man of Steel. The action in that movie is great, but just like a lot of his other projects, it really lacks substance. I wouldn't go as far as to call him a bad filmmaker or anything, but he's usually good when he's doing subversions of genres, like with Watchmen or Army of the Dead. For those reasons, I just don't think he'd be a good fit for Dragon Ball, especially not for the comedy side of it. In his defense though, I'm not sure what director would be a perfect fit for a Dragon Ball project. For something like that, you never really know. So if I were to go about a live-action Dragon Ball adaptation, what would I do? So the first things that kind of come to mind is History of Trunks. And as cool as that would be to do, at the same time, I feel like that's the safest option. It's a great story to adapt, plus the fact that you don't need a ton of characters because, well, they're all mostly dead. But let's go for something wacky. Let's do the Saiyan Saga. I want to do the Saiyan Saga because I feel like Z is probably the best starting point overall. Number one, it's the most popular portion of the story that a lot of people start it with. You can argue, why not start with Dragon Ball, the actual beginning of the series? Well, a lot of the situations in early Dragon Ball would just not really work well in live action. Mainly a lot of the content with Kid Goku, because, well, you guys have seen it. You know what happens. It'd be really jarring. I would personally have it be adapted as a series. Trying to adapt 48 chapters of manga into a 2-hour or less movie just seems really messy, especially when you consider that some liberties would have to be taken to account for the pacing. Adapting a series into another series just makes a lot more sense. Plus you have more time to flesh out your characters, your plot details, and everything of that sort. So for the sake of the scenario, let's say we have Netflix backing us and they give us 8 1-hour episodes. 8 episodes is a pretty fair amount of time, and I figure if One Piece can do it, then Dragon Ball can too. So the first couple episodes can be used for build-up. Episode 1 can start with a cold open showing the final moments of Planet Vegeta as Bardock tries to make a final stand. As we all know, that amounts to absolutely nothing. From there, we basically have Dragon Ball Z Episode 1, where we get the introduction of Gohan and the reintroduction to Goku and his friends. Except the only difference is that the runtime is much bigger, so we can spend a bit more time with them, and also get a bit more of Raditz's perspective. All of that leads to Raditz meeting up with Goku, explaining who he is and what he wants. He kidnaps Gohan, Goku gets upset, and Piccolo joins in as well. And boom, end of episode 1. You have your cliffhanger, you get some tension built towards episode 2 where the payoff happens. Episode 2 is the big fight with Goku, Piccolo, and Raditz. It can be a spectacle that establishes the gap in power that Raditz has in comparison to Goku and Piccolo. After a very long and strenuous fight, Goku ends up being packed up. Then we can cut to the reactions from his friends like Roshi, Krillin, and Bulma. Episode 3 can pretty much be the aftermath of what happened in episode 2. All of the other prominent characters will be introduced like Tien, Yamcha, Kami, Mr. Popo. Yeah, sure, why not Mr. Popo? He can be there. In this episode, we can pretty much get a look at how the Earthlings start to train for the Saiyans. Some really nice character interactions can come out of this. We can also get the start of Gohan and Piccolo's training together. Episode 4 can all just be about Goku's point of view in the afterlife, so we meet King Kai, Bubbles, and we can start his whole training arc as well. For episode 5, we can meet Nappa and Vegeta and get a glimpse of their conquest before they came to Earth. In that same episode, we can also see a bit more progress that the Earthlings are making in their training and see how Gohan is dealing with Piccolo as well. Episodes 6, 7, and 8 all focus on the Saiyan invasion. A part about the Saiyan saga that I always thought was kind of interesting is that you have certain characters that have never really been involved in like world-ending battles before, like Yamcha. All memes and jokes aside, him being here is a strong test of courage. So the events here play out almost exactly as they do in the anime and manga. The 7 men come, Yamcha gets packed up, followed by Chaozu, then Tien, and to the point where you have Krillin, Piccolo, and Gohan as your last stand. And then things get progressively worse when Piccolo dies. Then you have Gohan and Krillin there until Goku shows up and bodies Nappa, who is then annihilated by Vegeta. Then we have Goku versus Vegeta, and that carries out like it does in the show. We get the Grade 8 transformation from Vegeta, the Spirit Bomb stuff, and then Vegeta ends up being defeated after a ton of effort from Gohan, Krillin, and Goku. And yeah, that's the end of the season. So those are basically some quick little plot ramblings I have for a potential Dragon Ball live action. I did this pretty much off the cuff, so if it sounds incoherent or like a shit idea, then hey, I get it. But yeah, so if you guys were in charge of a Dragon Ball live action, what would you do and how do you think that could work? Let me know in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, then please give it a thumbs up. It helps my channel grow in more ways than you guys know. And from there, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.